This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Joby Martin, welcome back to the show. You look safe and warm, and here recently you were really cold. So this is coming out a few weeks from now, but you were just recently in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration of our 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. So what was that like? How'd you get hooked up, and why didn't you bring me?
I was an invited guest, and because of you, man, you introduced me to Chad Robichaux, and so Trump.
And then he gave me no love. What the heck, Chad?
Well, it's because Trump specifically wanted to bring some pastors, and so that's how that happened. So good on him, dude. It was awesome. The energy in Washington was through the roof. I mean, it was just really great. It was exciting.
Okay, so you sent me a few pictures that made me jealous. So you hung out with, so the one that's funny is Jon Jones. So obviously he's popped for steroids. He's had some terrible run-ins with the law. He's used his physical skills on women. But all I could think about is Jon Jones is the only dude walking around in Washington, D.C. with zero fear for his life. That guy is the most dangerous man when it comes to hands and feet on planet Earth. So what was it like standing next to somebody so dangerous?
Dude, he was super awesome. I mainly just went to talk to him so I could send a picture to JP, my 19-year-old son who competes in jiu-jitsu and is the biggest, UFC fan. And but then, David, we talked about the Lord, and he, because all these guys assume that I'm former military, just because like bald beard and tattoos, and I'm like, nah, I'm actually a pastor. So we talked about Jesus, and he followed me on Instagram. He said he was going to watch sermons, so let's go.
All right, we'll see how that goes. Well, speaking of Jesus, Joby, I don't know because you've seen this, but I got this new Jesus tattoo on my forearm. I'm working on my sleeve, so shout out to Dustin Yip in Oklahoma City. It's kind of peeling right now, but you guys can see it there on YouTube and Rumble. But I've been reliably informed by theology professors online, right, on Instagram, that I am violating one of the 10 commandments. And so I want to read it here in Exodus 20, okay? Exodus 20, starting in verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children of the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. And these guys, these geniuses, have reliably informed me that not only does that apply to putting a rendering of Jesus on my body, but if I were to put one in a picture frame on my wall, or to watch the Passion of the Christ or the Chosen or something like that, that I am violating one of those 10 commandments. What say you?
Those guys sound like a lot of fun, don't they?
Oh man, I've had fun with them.
So the whole point, if you shrunk down the second commandment, it's just don't worship idols. And then it instructs you on some ways that people historically have worshiped idols, particularly during that time. So are you worshiping an idol?
No, I don't believe so, sir.
Then you are not breaking the second commandment.
So that I will translate for Joby. Suck it, nerds. You got it wrong. Joby's right. I'm right. No. Just appreciate this amazing content
now, that
here.
Might be a sin. Telling somebody to suck it, nerds, that you might be sinning there.
Well, no, I didn't mean like literally, or maybe I did. Who knows? But we can just move right on. I do have another question. Because recently we've had, and you and I've talked about this, we had Christian apologist Wes Huff go on the Joe Rogan Experience and represent himself and Christianity very well. We had the great Jordan Peterson publicly saying that he believes that Jesus rose from the dead. He did that last year. But then in a recent interview on the Diary of a CEO podcast, he said that he believes that Jesus is God, which implicitly means that he publicly admitted for the first time that he believes in God, which he has not done. You've got guys like Russell Brand and gals like Ayaan Hirsi Ali coming out as Christians and publicly declaring that Jesus is Lord and their Savior. You have Richard Dawkins admitting that he's at the very least a cultural Christian, right? One of the four horsemen. You've got the explosion of Bible sales. You have our show, The Daily Blade, that is taking off, and we were one of 3 Bible-based content, shows that were in the top 10 of the Associated Press's best news shows of 2025. But at the same time, Joby, the fastest religion in the world in terms of growth is Islam. And so I want to ask you, is there a revival coming? Is there a a burning off of the fake and weak Christians and more of the legitimate stuff is coming out now? Are we losing cultural Christianity for real Christianity? Are we heading for our final duel with Islam or the dragon, which may be the same thing? Just give me your thoughts overall.
Yeah, probably some conglomeration of all that you just said. I mean, I think oftentimes in societies, the pendulum swings and overswings and corrects and overcorrects. And so there was definitely a societal overcorrection in regards to where, 15 years ago, the four horsemen of atheism were thought to be the future. And now they're literally irrelevant, right?
Yep.
And even, our guys like Jordan Peterson and Rogan are saying things about the Lord. Even President Trump in his inaugural speech talked about God like I've never heard him talk before. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what is this? Well, we'll see. I mean, the ultimate answer is we'll see. I want to believe that God is on the move and that the prayers that people have been sowing into our nation and our culture for a long time are coming to fruition. And I want to believe, I know that God's arms are not too short to save, and he's saving all kind of people all over the place. That's what I want to believe. Only time will tell. I would highly encourage your audience to not have your first instinct be a critic of what God could potentially be doing, but your first instinct to be a champion of what God could be doing. You see it in Mark chapter 2. You see it with the Pharisees all the time. Jesus does a miracle, and they criticize instead of champion the miracle. So you want to be on team Jesus here, hoping for hope, the hope of glory, which is faith in Christ Jesus. We don't want our instincts to be, well, I'm a critic of anything that I didn't have something to do with.
Well, we do have this chronological snobbery, as C.S. Lewis points out, that for a lot of us, we think that history started in like 1987 or something like that. But it's like, okay, I bet the people that were sitting just recently, I was digging into Jonathan Edwards' Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God sermon. And I bet people that were on the front end of the Great Awakening thought that something was going to happen there in the very, very near term. I bet you the people that were living through the Great Depression in the 1930s and 1940s and the, hundreds of millions of people, or over 100 million people that were killed between Mao and Pol Pot and Stalin and Lenin and Hitler and all those guys. I bet they thought that we were living through, no, the end times we're here, we're in it. And so that's, I guess, my encouragement for some people, you Revelation people that love like digging in and you're trying to crack the code and you're trying to like do the math and all that. It's like we could be in the final days of the real end times, but we just can't know that. But let's try to open our arms wide and welcome as many people into the tent as possible. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's very fair. I also think history has a tendency of repeating itself, and if you look in the late 60s looked a lot like our COVID race riot kind of thing going on here. A lot of similarities in those two things. And then what happened coming out of the late 60s was the Jesus revolution, which, the gospel was being preached, and people that were church people would have thought the least likely group of people to get saved were getting saved in the huge numbers. And it was a legitimate movement. I'm hoping and praying that coming out of like what the enemy intended for evil in America 4 or 5 years ago, that God is at work in that thing to bring a whole generation unto Christ. I mean, honestly, Kyle, if you just looked at, like, if our church was in the 1800s, they would write books about like the number of people getting saved and baptized, coming to Christ. There's a real movement of God right here in Jacksonville, but then you see it in these pockets all over. So I hope and pray. I mean, I really do. I hope and pray that God's just on the move, saving a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, history doesn't technically repeat itself, but it certainly does echo. So let's go to the next question here. This is from Eric Browning of the Forging Table fame. Brain science people tell us our bodies are constantly assessing threats and are built to naturally avoid pain and seek pleasure. Is seeking pain for the right reasons one of the ways we deny our flesh? If so, in heaven, is pleasure all we are going to experience all the time? Will there be war, competition, healthy pain, and suffering? So kind of a little bit more of an ethereal question, but what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, I have no idea. So I think it is the goal of why you're seeking pain that determines, like, if it's under the glory of God. So for instance, I'm sure both of us got up this morning early and we intentionally put ourselves through pain for a greater purpose, which was to steward the gift of our bodies that God has given us. Check.
Correct.
We go through the pain of taking the gospel to the third world. Check. Okay, those kind of things. But I do think to seek pain to somehow pay penance for sin is anti-gospel, because Christ's payment on the cross fully paid it all. So there's no amount of pain that you can endure physically that somehow adds to that.
Yeah, it's like self-flagellation, like Opus Dei and different sects where they would like literally,
they're dumb.
Make themselves, put themselves through pain. But I have thought about this as well. And again, we can't really know. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. Think of some of the most pleasurable moments you've ever had in your life. And we'll keep it PG here, but maybe when you see your kid do something amazing where they help someone else, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. And just that fluttery, lovey-dovey feeling when something just goes really, really, really well. Is that what Satan? Is that what heaven is going to be like? Is that kind of going to be what we're experiencing? Like, do we have any hints from Scripture?
Yeah, well, in Revelation, we don't, with the consummation of all things, we don't live in heaven forever. That heaven is a holding pattern right now for the consummation of all things, which is a new heaven and a new earth, that we will live in a new earth where there's the new Jerusalem. And if you take that down to the granular level, that sounds like we're going to be doing stuff like, living in houses and having jobs and accomplishing things. So it would be all speculation, but imagine, when Adam and Eve were cultivating the garden, there was hard work that had to be done. You just pulled out all of the pests and all of the thorns and thistles to that hard work. So there still seems to be that we will be overcoming things as a part of our eternal human experience. It'll all be to the glory of God, and none of it will be tainted by sin.
Okay, so we can't fully know, but can we at least agree that in this new earth, there's going to be dogs, right? We're going to have dogs, and it's going to be, like Samson, Roman, like those types of dogs?
Those types of dogs, I agree, yeah.
Okay, very good. Glad I could pull you all the way over to my side of things. All right, this next question
That's
is
why
from...
I said types.
All right. This next question is from a donor. Thank you, Adam, for being a donor. And guys, if you want your questions asked and put in this question bank, you either need to be me, you need to be on the forging table, or you need to be a monthly donor. So here we go. Pastor Joby, I've been following your sermons and the Q&As you do with Kyle for a couple of years now. I'm pretty sure that I remember you saying from the pulpit and on Kyle's show that women are not allowed to be pastors nor preach to mixed gender audiences. However, I saw where your church announced the saturated speakers for this year, and there is a woman that you are allowing to preach from your pulpit at your church. Have you changed your theological understanding of having women preach? If so, why?
Well, he put words in my mouth. The Bible says that the role of elder or pastor is for a man. But I did not say that a woman is not allowed to, ever talk in front of mixed gendered folks. So it really comes down to 2 Timothy, when Paul says, I do not allow a woman to preach or hold authority over a man. And so the question there is, does that mean both of those together? Like, can a woman not give instruction to a man on where the bathroom is during a church service? Is that what? Because some people would say yes. And then some people just kind of throw out the Bible and say it means whatever. Basically, if he wants to go listen to a Deepen podcast that'll come out in 2 or 3 weeks, I'll go into it for about 30 minutes. So I think what the Bible means is that the position of pastor is only for men, just like the position of father is only for men, period. And that there were women in ministry all throughout the New Testament, but none of them held the position of elder or pastor. And so that's where we land as a complementarian church. But there's all kinds of ministry activities that can happen. But the role of the Sunday weekend regular gathering preacher needs to be a man. Now, what we're putting on is a conference. And so I would give more latitude in a conference than I would the church service. And so that's where we land. There are going to be people on the right and left of me. The real thing you have to come to is, how did you get to that, to that idea? And the reason we got there is because we believe in the authority of Scripture, and we're trying to walk out the authority of what the Bible says for us today in our time, not trying to bend anything that it says, but just apply it. And that means apply it not to just limit the roles of men and women, but also fully express the roles of men and women in our church to the best of our understanding.
Hey guys, real quick. Very early on in Undaunted.Life, I knew I wanted to partner with a meat delivery service, but I didn't know which one to do. So I tried out several different ones, and here's the thing that I found out about some of the most popular brands that you've heard of before. These are people that are sending you stuff that is produced here in the United States, but every single month you might be getting beef from a different farm. And so one month your box may be full of amazing beef, and the very, very next month you're going to get stuff that isn't up to snuff and stuff that you don't want to feed yourself or your family. And so I wanted to partner with a farm, with an operation, with a cattle producer that is giving you the same high quality beef every single month. And that's why I want you to use the official beef delivery partner of Undaunted.Life, Primal Beef. Primal Beef is a cattle operation owned and operated by Sean Glass. He's a retired Navy SEAL that partnered with Jocko Willink, yes, that Jocko Willink, to launch Primal Beef. So what makes Primal Beef different from the other beef delivery companies? It's a combo of the following. It's all American Black Angus cattle. The beef comes from one farm, and that's in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. The beef is all natural, no hormones ever, no antibiotics ever, no mRNA ever. After slaughter, the entire carcass is dry aged and then hand cut by artisan butchers and then flash frozen to ensure that it maintains tenderness, marbling, and flavor. And here's another cool thing. For every box sold, Primal Beef donates meat directly to a member of America's Special Operations Forces through the C4 Foundation. So you can take pride in knowing that your purchase will help put literal food on the table for America's finest warriors. Are you salivating yet? If not, it's probably because you're a communist. Don't be a communist and try Primal Beef out today by going to www.primalbeef.com. That's primalbeef.com. Use the promo code Kyle to get $25 off your first order. Again, that's primalbeef.com. Promo code Kyle, Kyle, to get $25 off your first order. Yeah, I was wondering because when I was reading through the question, it's like, okay, well, there are church services, there are worship services, there are conferences, there are revivals, there's a lot of different categories of things. And so, I think you did a great job of kind of explaining, okay, what is the difference between a Sunday morning? Because there's also been, right. I think you and I have talked about it to where it's like, do we talk about political things for the pulpit, or is that something for Wednesday night, for churches that typically do a Wednesday night or a Sunday night or something? But what is Sunday morning for? So thank you for going into that detail. This next question is from me, and I don't think you and I have ever talked about this before. I frankly don't know that I've heard anyone talk about it, but it's why. So we see from scripture that when Jesus was resurrected, that he still had holes in his hands and a hole in his side, right? So why was he seemingly, at least visibly, not wounded in any other way? Because obviously we can tell from the cat of nine tails that he would have had his insides ripped open, his organs probably would have been exposed. The crown of thorns would have left a bunch of crazy marks all over his face. He was beaten, all the things, right? And so he comes back, he's fully healed, but he's got holes. Help me.
Yeah, somehow in our glorified bodies, we are still recognizable, but not limited by any of the pains that we have gone through in this earth. So, the thing about a hole or a scar is that a scar shows that it has been healed, And so I think a part of it, because he is the prototoko from the dead, he is the prototype. That means that when you and I see each other in glory, we will recognize each other, even though we're in our glorified states. I think one of the biggest things that you should take from that, and I don't think I'm answering your question physically, philosophically, or theologically very well, but I think the real takeaway from the scars of Jesus post-resurrection is that the enemy constantly tries to get you to be defined by your scars, and Jesus says, no, you're going to be defined by mine. So the things that happen to you don't get to ultimately determine who you are, but believing in the resurrected Christ means that he tells you who you are. So he is recognizable, and yet he's glorified.
So even in our glorified state, I'll still have my cauliflower, is what you're saying? So people will at least, recognize me in heaven. That's what you're saying?
I would, if I had it, I would want it. Don't you want it? It's like the biggest badge of honor right now. What used to be, because I had it in college a little bit, but I got it drained and got it under control fast, so it was fine. But
Hey, I will tell you, I was talking to someone the other day.
Very good things about you if you got cauliflower ear.
That's true, right? If you have an ugly face and messed up ears, people are like, well, that guy did a thing or two. But it is funny because I've had conversations with guys that I know were extended, like gospel conversations that were extended because they noticed my ears, right? And they said something about him because they're like, all right, this is not just like, some random like youth pastor or something like that. But I forget what I was going to say specifically. There was an objection that came up on the Wes Huff interview on Joe Rogan that I'd never heard before, but Joe Rogan asked Wes Huff about, well, did these people understand time back then? Which is kind of a silly question because we understand the sun going up and the sun coming down. So it was a very chronologically snobbish question, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of them writing it down, there is certainly a big difference between 3 days and 3 months because the thing that destroys Christianity is, the resurrection not being real. So if you can literally prove that Jesus never rose from the dead or that Jesus never died, right? That Jesus didn't die in the first place, but he went and hung out somewhere for 3 months and got a bunch of sage oil or something like that spread on all of his wounds. And then he came back, he looked better. Everyone thought he died, but he was actually alive. So I guess that's kind of where I was thinking about it. Is I was trying to think about it from if I was a strict materialist atheist and I was trying to destroy Christianity and looking at the evidence for it, that would be one way to explain it. Like, oh, it wasn't 3 days, you dummies. It was actually 3 months. He went and healed. He went and hid and healed. And then when he came back, everyone was freaking out because they're like, hey, the Romans, They always shoot their shot with crucifixion and they always hit their target. Does that make sense?
It does. The only thing is, there is a little bit of difference between Roman calendar and a Jewish calendar, but it's only a few hours off. And the difference is that like in the United States, we would use a day and 24 hours interchangeably, but any part of a day for the Jewish calendar is a day. So they talk about a Sabbath day, but it's not even, it starts one day and ends the other day. So it would only be a few hours off, because technically if he goes in the grave Friday evening and he comes out Sunday morning, that's less than 3 24-hour days, but it's a part of 3 days. That's where you get the 3 days from. So that would even all fall apart. But I feel like Rogan was just asking inquisitive questions. The whole thing is the amount of evidence for the resurrection is just absolutely overwhelming.
It is.
From a human nature standpoint, from a sociological standpoint, from a physical standpoint, and like Huff said, even the most hardcore atheists agree that the Romans did not put an almost dead guy in the grave. He was dead, all the way dead, And so all Rome had to do is produce the body. Nobody dies for a lie. We've been over these 100 times. Yep. But in fact, Kyle, sometimes if and when I have moments of doubt, the thing that brings me back to the certainty of my faith is the overwhelming evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. When I get to confusing things in the Bible about, because it's not like a house of cards built upon it's all built on did the resurrection happen or not? And because it did, now I can believe. That's my whole first 2 books. If the tomb is empty, anything is possible. So he's already pulled off the greatest miracle of all time through the resurrection. So I can believe him for all kind of things.
Well, and also don't unhitch from the Old Testament. That's not what he's saying. And then also if we want to get minute, the minute thing is that it was recorded that clear liquid came from when his heart was punctured. That can only happen postpartum. Or post-mortem, sorry, not postpartum, but post-mortem. That's the only time something like that can happen. We got time for maybe a couple more questions here, so I want to get into this. This is from a donor, Reg. Reg, thank you for being a donor. Reg was one of our very first donors, so shout out to Reg. We appreciate you. And it's kind of a flowing question, but psilocybin mushrooms, obviously we're talking about Joe Rogan. He's had guys on the show that just spend 3 hours talking about mushrooms. We've heard about veterans that go down and do these, psilocybin mushroom and these ayahuasca trips and things like that. But these are still in America considered to be controlled substances. There are some people that are like, hey man, these are not free lunch things. All right. This is not like, hey, it's natural, man. What does it matter? It's like, yes, it is helping people, but it is also hurting other people. And there are downstream consequences that we're not considering and that people like Joe Rogan and people that go on his show are not considering either. But specifically as it pertains to Christians, these things are categorized as drugs. And for the most part, all of us good kids that grew up Southern Baptist or whatever, it's just like drugs bad. We're not going to do it. I went through the DARE program and just where are you at on that? And how should Christians think about that? Because some people see it as medicine and some people see it as a psychedelic drug.
I don't think I'm very well informed, first of all. Secondly, I would say there are some things the Bible is clear about, and getting drunk would be one of them. So you need to avoid that. I don't trust our FDA as far as I could throw it. So I get all that. The question would be, so why do you want to do this thing? Like, what is it that you are pursuing? If a person is actually pursuing health for the sake of glorifying God with all of their strength and mind, okay. Now, I would have to get more informed on what that is, you know? Like, I wouldn't fault if you had some kind of cancer and there was something that was illegal in the States, but it was legal in Mexico, and you were going to go do that to be healed so that you could be the dad and the husband that you've been called to be. I wouldn't fault you whatsoever for that. The drug thing makes it a little different. Rogan, if he's being honest, just wants to do drugs.
Yeah, he wants to get high. Yeah.
Correct. And so, and okay, whatever. I mean, you know, he's not a believer. So if folks would just be real about what their actual intentions are, that's the real root of whether this thing is okay or not. Now, that's different from like government policy. Like here in America, I mean, here in Florida, there was a ballot about legalizing marijuana. Man, I voted no because just the amount of people that would be exposed to it. And if we could get in the time machine and back up and have different societal idea about what marijuana is and about what alcohol is, okay, maybe. And I hear all that, but we can't. We live here, and here's what I know. If that thing gets legalized, there's going to be a bunch of 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds that have no business ever touching the stuff, and they're going to try it, and they're going to ruin their lives over this thing. And so asking a question theologically and governmentally, I might even give you two different answers. The question behind the question on is, should you do those kind of psilocybin mushrooms and all that kind of stuff, in my opinion, would be what's the why behind what you want to do? Now, that being said, I wish we had the kind of government that would really research this stuff if it actually did help veterans fight against PTSD and come off alcohol and help with suicidal thoughts. And if that was the why behind it, then okay. But if you just are looking for a loophole to get high, then bro, just say what it is. That's a sin.
All right, very good. Well, we got time for one more question, and it's a tough one. And I mean, we probably need more than 5 minutes to unpack it, but 5 minutes is what we got. So in the last year or so, I've had the unfortunate duty, I guess, of talking to several men that are in categorically sexless marriages. And essentially, I think what that means is they're having sex 6 or less times a year. And with the men that I've been exposed to, again, I'm getting one side of the story, it is completely being controlled by their spouse. Okay. They desire sex. They want sex, and their spouse is withholding it from them on purpose. It is a power play. And one guy, it didn't end up so good. And the other guy is still in his marriage, and he is doing everything he can to lead his wife, right? Whatever the hell that means. And so both of these guys, I don't know what to tell them, because it's like, there's only so much you can do to create fertile soil for the plant to grow. But if the woman refuses and she is not going to listen to godly counsel, even if she claims to be a Christian, she won't listen to other women that are going to tell her what you're doing is sinful. She's not going to listen to her husband. She's not going to be led by her husband. In a lot of these cases, she has the more dominant personality than the husband anyway. The husband has not been the leader. They've usurped their role as the leader of the household. The women have taken over. But just straight up, what do you tell the guy in that situation? Like, what in the world is he supposed to do?
Yeah, be faithful, and it sucks. I've got no good news. Based on all those parameters you laid out, that you're supposed to love her like Christ loved you. And so that's a part, this incredible gift of God, given by God, that you have to lay down in order to love and serve her till death do us part, in good times and bad, in sickness and health. So it's sick and it's bad, and that's what you signed up for. That sucks, dude. And I mean, you know, the best thing that could happen is if she could get around some godly women and have some godly women pour into her 1 Corinthians 7 on, like she's in sin. Like porneo is not just about that Greek word porneo, sexual immorality, is not just about going outside of your marriage, like in fornication or homosexuality or pornography and lust. It's also abusing sex within your marriage. That would also be sexually immoral. Whether that means the guy is emotionally or theologically or physically beating up his wife in order to get sex, that would be sexually immoral. Or a wife with a power play withholding sex from her husband to punish him is also sexually immoral. So she is living in sin. And what he needs to do, I mean, listen, people are like, counselors are going to give him all kind of like tips and tricks on how to communicate and share needs or whatever. But fundamentally, what that brother's got to come to, which is, this sucks, man, but is that you take up your cross and you follow Jesus. You die to yourself and you love her unconditionally like he's loved you. And the only way you're going to be able to pull this off is through the gospel of Jesus Christ and the Spirit of God living in you. And every time your advances get turned down, even when they're good and godly and you did it right, then you remember Christ on the cross crucified for you. And this is just an opportunity for you to be Christ-like to her, even if you never get what you want. I mean, dude, the gospel's, that's what we've been called to. And I can't imagine. I mean, you know, I have a really godly, awesome wife who likes me and acts like it. And even, I know there's some women who listen to this, and the last thing I would ever want is for some guy to use some verses out of 1 Corinthians 7 to like manipulate or force his wife or whatever. But my wife has a really incredible understanding of my wants and needs, and she's a really, really godly wife when it comes to that. So that is the ideal. But where the ideal is unrealized, then grace abounds. But dude, it sucks. I mean, that poor guy. And it's going to damage everything in his marriage. It is, because you talk about the thermostat and the thermometer. Dude, the bedroom, it can set the temperature for your whole house. It can. And, but yeah, you made a vow, and God commands you to love her like Christ loved us. So even when we're terrible, when she's being terrible, then you got to love her. And that really does mean that, not manipulate her, that like really love her, not be resentful towards her, but really love her.
It's brutal, but I obviously think that you're right. But we're out of time. That's all for me. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
Wow, that's a fun way to end, huh? Good luck, buddy.
Isn't it?
Sucks to be
hey,
you.
I could have ended with another one, but I went this route. So, all right.
Of course you did. Of course you did. The guy that loves the lament psalms more than anything else.
I didn't say I loved him. I just said I learned from him. Okay, and I didn't end with a baby Hitler joke or a scenario. So, count your blessings. All right, Joby. We'll see you next month.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.